Yay,
What does
food.
the Bible say about food? What is our relationship to food? How is food used in hospitality? How are the old, maybe kosher food laws representative of their connection to that land? And how do we relate to food now as it's grown in our own land? And why do they use corn for everything in our food? And should you own your own chickens? We're going to be talking about all that on this episode of Theology on Air. I'm Evan McClanahan. I'm the pastor at First Lutheran. This is Sarah Stone.
Hi.
Executive Director of Theology on Tap.
Yep.
Soon to be renamed.
That's right.
I can say
We're in
that.
a rebrand. So if you're listening to this in real time or soon after, you can actually submit name suggestions.
Yeah.
And we'll be announcing the winner mid-November at a Protestant Reformation themed party.
As it turns out, it is illegal to call yourself Theology on Tap. And we've been doing it for all this time and breaking the law. So yes, HoustonTOT.com is where to go. November 14th will be that renaming party. Get involved. Come to our events and learn more. And subscribe to everything. Subscribe to the podcast. Even if you don't get it, it helps us. Leave a review. That helps us. Find us on YouTube as well. So there's that. Okay.
All the things. Ring the bell.
All the things. Ring the bell. Subscribe. Okay. And of course, part of our Houston Theology on Tap leadership team, soon to be renamed.
Oh my gosh, you don't have to say it every time.
Is Meredith Mills.
Hi.
Pastor at Westminster Methodist Church.
Westminster, yep.
I am reading a book right now called Going to Church in Medieval England. And I learned that the word minster is the English version of monastery or monasterium. And so there was Westminster and Eastminster because they were religious communities in England. So anyway, so I thought of you as I was reading that last night, learning about the word minster. But
and Meredith is also the visionary behind Gastro Church.
Yes.
Which is a perfect segue to what we're talking about today, which is a really cool experiment and intentional conversation over good food, right?
About spiritual things over really good food, yeah.
Okay.
tell us about those things.
Yeah. So I started Gastro Church because I had a revolution in my own faith that food matters. So I grew up in the suburban culture. I grew up getting my food from the grocery store. I mean, to give my parents due credit, we did have a garden in our backyard. My mom did her due diligence in trying to make me understand that food doesn't grow in grocery stores. But the overall mentality was a complete divorce from place. Like we lived in a suburb we were the first people to live in our house. We were, the trees were this tall because they were just planted. The food was always available. You can have whatever you want any season because you just go to the grocery store and that's where the food's available. And so when I started going to seminary, I heard inklings about the spirituality of food, the, faith ethics of food. And I was like, give me a break. Like, come on. Like, what are we going to do next? Like the spirituality of makeup or, it's like,
Well, now that you mention it.
Right.
Yeah.
It's like let's just get back to the basics and get to stuff that is actually in the Bible and actually in our spiritual tradition. And then I realized it was in the Bible.
So much.
No, so this, maybe you guys already know this, but I had to go back and reread my Bible. And it was a couple of books that really opened my eyes. Ellen Davis's Scripture, Culture, and Agriculture was one of them. And it was like she was reteaching me how to read the Bible. And I realized all this stuff was there. It had been there all along.
Yeah.
All of these texts were there. I just didn't read them because I was reading them through suburban eyes. I was reading them through eyes of somebody who assumed food was always going to be there, who assumed food was ever present, always abundant, and was going to appear no matter what the conditions had been, drought, not drought. I just took it for granted. And that had impacted my reading to the point that I didn't realize it was actually in the Bible. What we see in the Bible is that food plays an enormous role in not only God's creation, but God's relationship between his image bearers and his creation. So you want me to do a real quick run through of just starting?
Yeah.
So you start
Whistle stop tour. Take us there.
Yeah.
Whistle stop tour, starting at the beginning. What we see is that God creates in relationship. And so there's this kind of sets of relationship. God creates humanity in relationship with each other, right? So the human and human are created in relationship with each other. The humanity is created in relationship with God, but there's also this relationship with the created order that is set up to be good. So the man has this role in naming creatures, in stewarding the garden, taking care of the garden, and they are also given permission to eat famously not one of the fruits, but to eat from the fruit of any other tree in the garden. If you think about it, eating fruit is the only way of eating that does not actually involve death. Every other way of eating involves killing something. Even most of our vegetarian eating would involve killing the plant, unless it is fruit. Fruit, because it is part of the reproductive cycle, is an outgrowth. It is a way of eating in which both parties maintain their life.
Fun fact, Jainism, that's similar to Hinduism, feel so strongly about preserving life that they will not eat root vegetables, anything that actually kills the plant.
Exactly.
So they'll eat like lettuces and fruits because the thing can continue to live.
So that's what the image that we get in Eden is that they're given permission to eat the fruit of any plant in the garden. And the image is that like it's all life. Everything is life. And then once we get out of the garden and the earth is filled with violence, then presumably they start killing animals at that point. But it's not condoned until after Noah. And after Noah, you have this new covenant where God gives permission. And it's almost like, okay, y'all are going to do it anyway. Yeah. We're going to give permission with some restrictions. You can kill for food, but we're going to put restrictions on that. And the image is that once you move into the fallen world, this relationship still exists. This relationship is still important, but there are more restrictions on it because of the necessity of death, because of the presence of death. And so what you have after that is when the people move into the land and they receive the law, so much of the law is about how they are supposed to relate to the land. So Leviticus 25, we have the land is God's. You are just tenants on the land. Your taking care of the land is your fulfillment of the covenant. And this was taken so seriously that you have, later on, you have the story of Naboth's vineyard, where Naboth's vineyard being stolen actually echoes later on when David takes Bathsheba and then kills the husband. It's the same kind of thing where, this wicked king takes this, sacred covenantal piece and then kills the one who is in charge of it. And they're supposed to echo each other because it was the same level of commitment, the same level of
stealing something that wasn't yours, that was important.
Right. But if you think like the relationship between husband and wife, that is almost what is echoed in this relationship between landowner and land.
Yeah.
Or land, it wasn't even considered an owner, it was considered a steward. And so this idea that you are supposed to be in relationship with the land, the outgrowth of that relationship with the land is the food that the land produces. The number one way that you maintain this relationship with the land is by taking care of it so it can produce food and then enjoying what it produces. Yeah. And it's not, this is where we get laws about feasting. Like you're supposed to feast a certain number of times. You're supposed to enjoy it. You're supposed to feast with gratitude and enjoy what the land has produced, because when you are in good relationship with the land does produce and you have full harvest and that everyone enjoys and everyone has enough. And this image that's presented throughout the Old Testament of this ideal is an echo back to Eden, not fully Eden, but this echo back to if part of you living out your faithful covenant is you living in good relationship to the land, in good relationship with me, which will then produce this good food that will feed enough for everyone. And you know what? When you have a good food that feeds enough for everyone, it's also really pleasurable, right? It's also a really joyful way of living. I mean, he also mandated lots of wine to drink. So it wasn't...
I was just going to say, there's all this language all throughout the Bible, especially in the Old Testament. Anytime they talk about a great harvest or vineyard or wine, it's always about joy from the Lord, blessing, abundance, flourishing. Yeah.
You are not just supposed to like these laws are not supposed to be drudgery for you. They're supposed to be a means of you enjoying and producing the bounty and the abundance in your life and sharing it with everybody. Nobody's supposed to be left out in Israel. So you fast forward. Go ahead.
I want to say two things. Okay. Because going back to Noah, there's a strange thing that's said, because you said there was like a change there where like, we'll allow you to kill animals now. And I think that's the first time he says like you have to drain the blood of an animal, right? Yes. So I've never quite understood that life is in the blood, and then the whole things are made out of that later. But I don't know if you have any thoughts on that. But I don't want to drain the whole cow,
Someone else will do that for you.
Yeah. But anyway, but that is echoed in Leviticus, but Noah. Okay. So that's what you're alluding to there. Like,
it is a trying, I mean, whatever we can think of it, like scientifically, I think from a theological perspective, it is trying to put some boundaries around killing.
okay.
So that we are not just
Willy-nilly.
we're not just the animals.
And the way animals are killed then, like in Old Testament law, you know, they're hung upside down and the throat is slit. It's relatively humane and the knife should be sharp and that kind of thing.
Right. You're supposed to take it seriously and you're supposed to, I think, understand what it costs.
Yeah.
Right? You're supposed to understand that killing right now, the way we exist, death and eating are intricately linked. But you're supposed to understand that. Right?
Yep.
You're not supposed to eat without understanding that something has died.
Well, and then that's setting up everything for the sacrificial system, which will then point to, you know, Christ giving up his life and the blood being shed.
So I'm really jumping the gun, but we've talked about this a lot because we've had whole events about heaven and the new heavens and the new earth and what that's going to be like, and the lion will lay with the lamb. So you seem to have no predation and prey anymore. So I'm like, well, do we only eat fruits? You know?
Here we go.
So no,
this is our controversial hook.
Okay, so you should.
The way.
We're so controversial. We're vegetarian.
Listen, I love steak.
Okay, Clean Eating. It's a book. I forgot who it's by, but I'm sure Google knows. It is a theological defense of vegetarianism, and it's fascinating because it's more. So I knew that, right? I knew the Isaiah thing. I didn't realize how deeply woven into the entire Old Testament the concept of so killing as violence, and killing as violence is being less than ideal.
Okay.
Something that we have to do for now, but something that is not necessarily going to be included. Like you remember in the wilderness, God gave them manna, and it was only when they complained more that he gave them quail, and when he gave them enough that they would choke on it. Right?
Well, I'm perfectly happy with like not eating meat in the next life because I mean, well.
Hopefully, a pomegranate will taste like a steak or something.
Or like I just won't have the desire, so I won't care anymore.
Right. I mean, so what we have to envision that if the lion is changed enough from the creature that we currently call lion to a creature that will lay down with the lamb, then we have to presume that we are going to be changed from the creature we currently call human to a new kind of creature that will be human, but whatever, you know, the sanctified version of that is. And I don't think we can fully anticipate exactly what that's going to look like.
Well, that's the question. It's like, well, if they're like can there be death in the new heavens and the new earth, you know? So like, or does a steak just magically appear? Or does it have to come from a dead cow?
But now you're getting into, are like plants going to die?
Right. Well,
Probably.
I know.
It's the natural cycle of things.
Yeah.
Is there going to be a natural cycle?
Ooh, I mean, it's a new heaven and a new earth.
I mean,
Do you think there was plant death before sin entered the world? I know that's not where this was supposed to go.
All of this is the realm of questions that I do not have like a strong need to like fight a battle for.
Well, and
but
even within like vegetarianism, you have people that are like, well, you shouldn't even milk a cow.
Exactly.
You know, so you know the whole vegan vegetarian debate. And I'm sure there are different levels of veganism and different levels of vegetarianism. So yeah, I'm not trying to answer all that, but I do wonder.
Right. So, okay. So there's that way to take the conversation. But the thing is, what most Christians have done is they've taken the conversation where I did, which is that food doesn't matter at all. Food is not an ethical concern.
Yeah.
Food is not something that has any thing to do with our spirituality. And I don't think you can make that statement and have the Bible we have. I think God never stopped being not only aware of, but concerned with the created order. And I think the most intimate relationship we have with the created order is what we eat and how we eat it. And even if we don't think it's important, the fact that we are doing it over and over and over and over again is affecting our spirituality, our relationship with God, our covenant, however you want to call it. And it's not that just because we don't think important doesn't mean it isn't important.
Yeah.
Well, I wanted to ask one other thing, and you might get to this, so if so, just shut me up. But like an example of an Old Testament law would be that the seventh year you let the land fallow.
Yes.
You know, so whereas, and that harkens back to, you know, obviously the 7 days of creation and letting, you know, yourself rest. And so it seems like God has some knowledge or awareness or wisdom about what the land needs to replenish. And again, you might talk about this, but obviously we don't do that. You know, we take strip of farmland. And in most cases in the Midwest in America, it's, it could be wheat, but it's corn or soybeans, and that's the basis of our entire system. The land never gets a chance to lie fallow. We pump it full of fertilizer to make it grow. We offset because the soybeans give to the ground and the corn takes from the ground. The seed is genetically modified. There's nothing real about it at all.
Right.
In fact, none of us even eat the corn. That just goes to the meat that we eat.
Right.
Or it's used as it's actually what your chicken McNugget is. Yeah. So I don't know if you want to go there or not or what.
So you're getting into the realm of the kinds of debates people start having once they think food is an important thing to think about.
Yeah.
Right? So once you get over the hump of thinking food is theologically important, then everything's on the table. Right? Everything's on the table. How we eat, why we eat, so the other thing I love about the Sabbath year for land is when you go, again, this is something that I'd read these books so many times and I never saw it. The last line of the historical books after the exile, all the stuff about the exile and the weeping and all the stuff that happened. The last line is the land was given 70 years to get the Sabbath rest that it never got under the Israelites.
Say that again.
That.
The land was given, I have to look it up to get the exact word, but the land was given the Sabbath rest. And I think it was 70
hadn't
years.
gotten.
Exactly. The land was given the Sabbath rest that it had never gotten under the Israelites. That is the implication that part of me kicking you out was not just you worshiping other gods, not just you not keeping the covenant, not just all the other things you did, but you never let the land rest. You never followed my commandments for being in good relationship with the land that I entrusted to you.
It's like forced restoration for the people and the land.
Exactly.
And by the way, the 6th year produced enough produce for the 7th, just like the manna in the wilderness.
So fun fact, Orthodox in Israel today, their way around this is on the 7th year, they sell their land to non-Jewish people to keep the land going. Or they have some kind of rotation set up to where there's one field lying fallow every year and they can rotate it around or something like that.
And some of the bougie chefs in America are starting to do that too because they're recognizing that things taste better. And a lot of small farmers already do that. Yeah.
I mean, so the people who are really trying to do the regenerative farming stuff, and see, this is the thing. Once you get into the regenerative farming, you realize that there is a way of living with the earth that actually improves the earth, which is the vision of Eden. There's a way in which humanity does not have to destroy the planet to live on it. Mm-hmm. There is a way of living with the planet that actually improves the planet, which is what the regenerative farming is all about. There is a way of interacting with the soil that actually builds the soil rather than destroying it. And a lot of those principles are drawn. I mean, not one for one. It's not like they're going and following the Old Testament law, but the principles of letting it lie fallow, of caring for the land as an actual creation and not just a commodity.
Yeah.
I like that creation, not commodity.
Comes to us from this vision that is set up back in Genesis and continued throughout the Old Testament. And really, I think the only reason it's not talked about as much in the New Testament is that everyone took this for granted until the modern times.
Yeah.
So we have only been privileged enough to ignore our food sources for the last 100 years. Yeah. Really, it's since the Industrial Revolution and since the Agricultural Revolution that we've invented supermarkets, invented our current way of eating, invented this notion that we can be divorced from the land regardless of what happens with the land. Nobody else in the history of the world has been able to do that. Yep. And so no one else I don't think this would have needed to be spelled out for any other generation.
It's a foregone conclusion.
The way it would need to be spelled out for us. I mean, every other culture would have understood food is wealth. Land is wealth in cursed soil. Right. These curses of Genesis 3. Cursed soil is the most fundamental curse you can have, because if the soil does not produce food, there is no life. Yeah. Whereas we're just like, I read one writer who was writing about the degradation of soil in America, and he goes, well, there might just come a time where we have to buy our food from somewhere else. And I'm like, are you kidding me?
Yeah. So that's a real concern, is that we're going to have another Dust Bowl soon. Yeah. Because the only reason we're able to grow as much as we are is through chemical manipulation. I mean, fertilizer itself is natural gas. So when you have, Ukraine and Russia going off to war, and the biggest natural gas producers in the world, that cut off the natural gas supply, that cut off fertilizer production. You have whole farms in the Midwest going, we're not going to be able to grow as much corn. We're not going to grow as much soybeans. And you're going, Anyway, but let me.
He scratched his head for those listening on the podcast.
I want to tell a funny story because RFK Jr. and he's an independent now, so I'm not on either side here. On his podcast, he had Joel Salatin.
Yes.
Okay. I figured
he's a hoot.
Yeah, he's a hoot. And so the story that's funny though, Joel Salatin is a regenerative farmer. He has pigs, chickens, and cows. He rotates them on his land. He regenerates the soil. He uses, one to heck, the chickens peck at the land, and then that, I don't know, then they poop, and then that produces the grass that the next thing eats, and then they poop, and that produces the whatever that the next thing eats. And, he like literally has like 1,000 chickens. He like moves around on his farm and so forth. Anyway, but he sells locally. He sells his food locally. And Michael Pollan, he did a whole book and interviewed him and talked about it. Okay, here's the story. So someone goes to Joel Salatin's farm and says, I want to buy New York strip. And he says, well, okay. And they said, how much is it? And he kind of started to apologize for how expensive it was because he says, this is our technique and it's just more expensive and we don't use hormones and da-da-da. And he said, it's $11.99 a pound. And the person was like, well, it's $17.99 a pound at the grocery store down the street. This was within the last year. And like a light bulb went off, even for someone like Joel Salatin, where he's like, okay, my system is now producing cheaper food than the other system because they don't have to get the fertilizer from Ukraine and they don't have to use the Monsanto seed.
It's like finally paying off.
It's finally paying off. And so...
And the other system is subsidized also.
Oh, yeah. I mean, our taxes, pay for it, right? So...
we finally found an area where you two are on the same side.
No, I'm becoming a total hippie on this. I actually think we need to take these 2,000-acre tracts of corn, and we need to turn them into like 20 micro farms or whatever.
So, fun fact: this is an area where right and left meet.
Yeah,
like there, and it's funny. Like you go full circle and like meet on the other side. Mother Earth Living, which is like one of the magazines that. Once you start getting into this stuff, like people subscribe to this magazine, and they did a survey of their readers about liberal, conservative. They're asking politically, not theologically.
Yeah.
But it was something like 6. So it was all varies. There was nothing in the middle. Very conservative or very liberal. 60% very conservative, 40% very liberal, but nobody in the middle. And it's like you on both sides, they have their own reasons for starting to take this very seriously, and it's
environmentalism.
Well,
fascinating to see the mix at the farmers market.
The closer you get to the political, I mean, for example, the first primary or caucus technically is in Iowa. So both all the presidential candidates always have to go into Iowa and be like, no worries, we're gonna make sure all the corn farmers are taken care of. And there are a lot of Lutherans up there, a lot of good corn farmers and all that, but. I think there are huge political considerations that make it very difficult to speak any truth to this issue. I mean, heck, we make fuel out of ethanol. We make ethanol out of corn, I should have said, which is ridiculous. It takes a lot of water to do, and anyway.
So in all the ethical considerations, there has to be a way to do any kind of change that still takes care of farmers, right? I mean, the only reason farmers are growing what they're growing is because we're paying them to do it, right? The only reason farmers stopped doing what they were doing is because they had external forces basically forcing them to stop doing what they're doing. So there has to be a way to not completely screw over farmers when we're making whatever change needs to be made.
Hopefully, a smart person could come up with a plan over the next 10 to 20 to 30 years, basically encourage farmers to transform, their farms into these, use the Joel Salatin model, just import that everywhere. And there's other people doing lots of other things too, but the flip side of this, is that, we produce more food than we eat.
Oh, yeah.
So it's something is working, right? The genetically modified seed produces, corn kernels as big as a quarter, and then that feeds all the animals, and we throw food away, and we're all getting, by the way, like pre-diabetic and obese. So something seems to be.
I have so many thoughts about this. I mean, this is when we get disconnected from our food system and we stop thinking about food as an ethical choice, then it becomes you can do anything you want to. And it no longer becomes a question of my faith, how I put things in my body and what I put into my body. It's I can do anything I want to. And what happens when you get that disconnected is you stop caring about the level of waste.
Hey guys. Sarah here. Sorry to interrupt the podcast. I know it was awesome, but I just wanted to tell you that Theology on Tap is growing. We are now a standalone ministry, an independent nonprofit, and to grow, we need your help. We're offering more live events, more follow-up opportunities to reach the unchurched, and increased partnerships with local churches. You can help us grow by praying for us, by telling your friends or church about us, and of course, partnering with us financially. To donate, go to houstontot.com/give. Okay, enjoy the rest of the show.
I guarantee you, if everybody either hunted or processed their own meat, they wouldn't waste it. They probably would still do it. I mean, I talk to people who work on, my sister-in-law has a farm.
Yes. If you hang out with Meredith's family, they will just inject sentences like, I butchered a goat earlier today. While you're just sitting around the campfire. Yeah.
We literally at one of our recent family gatherings processed a couple of roosters because someone had to take them home and cook them. And so that happened. But the thing is, like, it's not pleasant. Nobody likes doing it. For all the vegetarians who are like, you like murdering. No, nobody likes doing it. But if you're going to eat meat, it's more responsible to do it yourself, to know what it costs and to not waste it, right? Like when we use chickens, we use all of it. And
tell our listeners, you have chickens. Tell us about your chickens.
We actually don't tend to eat our chickens because Jordan's a big softie.
That's her husband.
Who does not. And I'm also, I mean, Jordan would be the one in charge of that because like I'm not taking that over.
You've got all these in-laws that could come butcher them for you.
That's true. And if we have a mean rooster we need to get rid of, we give it to the in-laws.
A mean rooster. That's hilarious.
No roosters.
But you mostly have chickens that are laying eggs.
We mostly have laying hens. And so back when I was having my food is important revolution mentally, I planted a garden and I got chickens. And that was my little way of like, I need to start doing something. I need to start reconnecting with the source of my food. I also started shopping at a co-op, which part of what happens in your life once you make this is that food all of a sudden becomes a lot more work. So instead of having the food just like immediately given to you, you have to do a lot. Like even if you're getting food from a co-op, there's a lot of work in washing all of that produce and prepping all that produce. There's a lot of work in gardening.
And you don't just go and pick out what sounds good to me right now.
Exactly.
It's like, I got a bumper crop of okra. I guess I have to learn how to love okra.
You learn to have gratitude for what you have received instead of choosing what you want.
And be creative with it.
It is like Ecclesiastes in a in a little basket handed to you.
Yeah.
I love the discipline of receiving the bounty that the earth has produced and enjoying it instead of thinking about what do I want, because so much of our culture encourages us. Find your identity by thinking about what you want.
Yep.
And
it's
true.
Good. Like that's really good.
Like everything in the culture says you are a consumer. Your identity should be defined by what you want and what you buy. And the Bible is suggesting this alter. I mean, it's pushing back on a number of levels. But when it comes to the earth, enjoy what you've been given.
I love that. That's a nugget,
what
man.
You've been given.
That's really good.
So tell Timothy to make a short with that.
When you are in just a ritual of behaving with the earth in that capacity, it is more work. It is more time. It makes you think about it more. Food becomes a part of your life more than if you're just going and ordering something. And that then I think that's part of the reason all these food laws are built into the Old Testament, is that is supposed to be a foundational habit for all of us that then affects the rest of our lives. You stop taking other things for granted. You stop thinking about, what do I want? Like, what can I buy? And you start thinking about what have I been given and what has the earth produced for me? What has my life produced?
And then you get into a whole cycle of spiritual maturity there, because then you're operating out of gratitude, which means that you're acknowledging that your gifts come from God, and that makes for happier people. And this is what every self-help book will tell you, right? Like even the ones that don't acknowledge God, gratitude makes your life better.
Absolutely.
Makes you happier. That's what our next little newsletter blurb is going to say.
Absolutely. So as people start to take this seriously, so that is one of the changes that I see ethically, as people start to take this seriously. Another is that they start getting to the politics of it. And there's all kinds of political conversations you can have about that. And the third is that this starts to affect people communally. So one of the fun facts about eating in the United States is that we have come to a place, and I haven't read statistics recently, but I'd be surprised if they change, especially post-pandemic. We have come to a place where the majority of our calories taken in are secondary calories rather than primary calories.
What does that mean?
That means primary calories are calories you eat at a meal, usually with others. Secondary calories is like the snack you have in your car.
Yeah.
Your snack drawer.
Diet Coke.
Yeah, it's a Diet Coke.
You know what? I feel attacked right now. There aren't any calories in Diet Coke.
Oh.
Boom.
So,
there are.
So Michael Pollan draws this reference, and I back when I was having my food revolution, I binge read everything Michael Pollan wrote. Mm-hmm. He has this analogy. There's a very strong argument that the beginnings of civilization happened around a cooking pot, right? So when people developed fire, when they started cooking meat, not only did the meat become more energy efficient, more nutritionally available, but the act of cooking meat took so long that you would sit around a cooking pot together and you would talk. And so you started telling stories and you started developing this thing we call civilization. And so the movement towards civilization was foraging berries in the woods alone to sitting around a cooking pot together and eating at a meal.
I love that.
Look at what's happened in American society is we have moved from sitting around a cooking pot together at a meal back to foraging by ourselves alone.
But it's not berries, it's Reese's,
it's not berries. It's stuff that
it's protein bars and
it's stuff that is so disconnected from its root in creation that you cannot even identify the natural elements that went to create this thing. Yeah. What plant grew a Cheeto, right? Yeah. So like I've got a whole nother thing I can do on flavors and what we've done with flavors and artificial flavors. But the thing that comes to most people as they start to wrap their minds around the ethics and the theology of food is that part of eating well means as often as we can eating together.
I love that. I'm here for that. Yes.
Yeah, because
do you ever have any events where people eat?
Have you ever done that, Sarah?
Well, it's one of my pet peeves that people don't linger around a meal anymore. Yeah. Like it's almost forced. If you've been to my house for a meal, you know that after we start eating, I say, okay, so here's a question to go around the table. And sometimes people roll their eyes, but it is partly to sort of force people to sit in that space and share thoughts and talk about the food, but talk about each other. And
Yes, absolutely. And I do think, again, people think of this as a tangential issue, but it is not. There is a reason that our central sacrament is literally eating around a table. Like if nothing else convinces you that food is important to God, think about communion, right? Yep. When Jesus thought about like, what sacrament can I leave with you to symbolize for you what it is like to be in my presence? He chose this. He chose bread and wine and a table, and you're not supposed to do it by yourself.
That's right.
You're not supposed to do it alone. You're supposed to do it and be reminded that you are a part of the body of Christ. You're incorporated into the body of Christ. And so that, combined with everything else we see about food in the Bible, shines this ethic onto how we interact with food, that it is supposed to be responsible. It's supposed to connect us to creation. It's supposed to be received joyfully, and it's supposed to be received together. It is supposed to be something that is a part of the way that binds us to each other. And today, when we're in an era where the Surgeon General, announced an epidemic of loneliness and isolation, I think more than ever, Christians need to start taking this seriously. This is not something that is tangential to our faith. This is not something that like the New Agers brought in. This is something that is as old as Eden, and we need to reclaim it as one of the most important ethical aspects of how we live out our faith, because this is ours. This is our home territory. And if we really start living out this, I think we could offer a countercultural witness to the world in so many ways about how to live well, how to eat well, and how to form a community that is truly healthy and abundant.
Man, yes. I'm in. You guys want to go in together on a cow? Yes. I'm not even joking. I'm so inspired right now.
We do that pretty regularly.
Grass-fed cows by the half.
What were you saying?
We do that pretty regularly. We go through. Yeah. I have some farmer friends, and so we'll rotate through. But I do have I
don't have a big enough freezer. That's my problem.
Well, that's why we all three have to go in on it together. A pig. I do a pig too.
We actually have 2 freezers. I do have to walk a line with my husband too, though. Jordan is totally in for all of this, but he is also very, very frugal. And so whenever he sees sales at the grocery store, regardless of where that meat originated, we're getting lots of that meat
that's funny,
because it is a good financial deal. And so we walk a line in our house.
Well, of course. I mean, everybody does. Man, I love this so much. I'm considering joining a co-op again. I did years ago, and the joke I made about okra, I now love okra because I used to hate okra because I thought the only association I had was gumbo. I'm so sorry. I don't like gumbo. I know that makes me like a bad Texan or something, but because it was slimy. But we got all this okra. This was years ago. And I was like, well, I'm going to make it unslimy. So I discovered that you can roast it with a little bit of panko and da-da-da. It's crunchy. I've now had my own bumper crop of okra where I had to learn to pickle it, and I eat entire jars of pickled okra. It's so delicious. But I wouldn't have known that if I weren't sort of forced to take what the land offered, like you said.
Yeah. I the first time I ever got rainbow chard in my CSA box, I was like, what is this? And I now love it. I love it, love it. I've always loved sauteed greens, but rainbow chard with eggs, could eat that every day and not get tired of it. And I get eggs in my backyard, so there you go.
Boom. What else do you grow in your garden? I'm just curious. It's been a while since I've been back there.
I'm in a season of growing children right now. So we've kind of...
We don't eat them, though, do we?
We have divided... It's funny. I thought I would... Because I think so much about food, I thought I'd be the kind of parent to really feed my children very well. And my children eat far more processed food than I would like to admit.
It's hard to avoid.
It is very hard to handle all of the things at one time because food is so much work. And so we've divided up. I do the inside of the house. Jordan does the outside of the house. And so Jordan's garden right now, we have a bumper crop of cucumbers. So we have a mandatory 1 cucumber per person per day because we're trying to...
Wow.
Mandatory. You have to eat a cucumber.
You should have brought me some. I would have bought them for you. My guinea pig loves them. I love them. We all love cucumbers.
You know what? I actually forgot to bring your spoons too. I'll bring you spoons with cucumbers sometime soon.
You'll have a funny relationship.
I'll take a dozen eggs too.
I'm also going to bring him.
If you're giving stuff away or selling it or whatever.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
So we've got cucumbers. His okra did not do as well this year.
Okra was hard this year because of the drought.
Well, we still have okra that's canned from last year because his okra did so well. At some point I was like, you've got to stop bringing in the okra because I can't
tell a funny story about canning real fast?
Yeah.
So obviously our grandparents probably all canned, but my grandparents and their family all canned and whatnot. And so my grandfather had twin sisters, and when their mother died or one of them died or someone died, they realized there are all these cans of food under a bed that they kind of didn't know were there, and they were dated from 1950. And this was in the late 90s.
Right.
Oh my God.
And they were fighting over them.
What?
And they ate them and they were fine. They were like, oh yeah, they were delicious. So if you know how to can.
Yep.
Yeah. I have okra trying to grow right out there.
Yeah.
But I waited too late until the summer, so I need some tips before y'all go.
I gave you plenty of tips.
Jordan,
I started in July, and that was ridiculous. So hopefully next year I'll get it done right.
Jordan loves giving gardening tips. He'd be happy to. We usually get a lot of tomatoes too. Right now he started something funny. What was it? He tried potatoes. I think
I root stuff. I have some purple carrots growing right now, and I'm like, if they work, when I pull them up, that's it.
Yeah.
There's no continual
right.
Anyway.
And that is one of those ones where you're killing the plant by eating it.
But it is so delicious.
It is delicious. And fresh carrots really, really are great.
I should be getting a pear tree, a plum tree, and a peach tree pretty soon.
And a partridge. Sorry, I just had to.
I know they're all peas, but I hope to plant them somewhere around here. One of the things too is related to this is the nutritional value of the food that we eat. So I tried to find some good data on this recently because I actually gave a sermon about a lot of these topics recently, and I've heard different things. Let's just say it's a pretty well established fact by now that growing food super fast using fertilizers or whatever it is they're doing is decreasing the nutritional value. So you have to eat 2 oranges for 1 orange from some time in the past.
Yes.
So,
yeah, I'd love to hear your thoughts about that.
Yeah.
We don't eat the same bread as
No, there's a lot that's been written on this, and it doesn't taste the same either. So when people say oh, tomatoes just don't taste the way they used to, they're not wrong. It's not just soil quality, it's the kinds of seeds that were used and all kinds of things like that. There's a lot of books you can get into. One of my favorite, so there's 2 books on one of my favorite things in talking about food is to talk about flavor. And flavor exists in food to draw our attention to the nutrition that's in the food. That's why we have it, right? Your body, free of anything else, could direct you toward the nutrients you need from the flavors that are in the food.
This is the intuitive eating model.
Right. When it works. So they've actually, back before they had ethics in studies, they had a study that was done on orphans, and they allowed these orphans to free choose a bunch, and it was all nutritious foods, but it was like liver and,
I really want to talk about liver because I love liver, and
oh my gosh,
it bothers me that people don't like liver. But go ahead.
Let this lady talk.
They put all these foods out for these orphans, and they found like young children, so like 3 and under, and they let them free choose every meal, and they found that the orphans would sample a little bit of every food, and then they would eat really random stuff. But if you added it all up over the course of the whole experiment, it balanced.
Yep.
And there was even a little boy who started with rickets, which is a deficiency, I think, in vitamin D or A, one of those. And he free chose the cod liver oil that was out, which tastes disgusting, by the way, unless you have rickets and your body needs it.
You need it, yeah.
Exactly. And he free chose the cod liver oil until he didn't have rickets anymore, and then he never touched it again. They've seen the same thing with, there was someone had noticed like goats were eating something weird, like it was like hay with urine on it, and they found out like that was breaking down something in their stomachs that was allowing their food to become more bioavailable to them. So the idea, flavor, it exists to alert our bodies to what is nutritionally in the food. Yeah. So what happens when you screw with flavors, right? Yeah. What happens when you take a corn chip and you put a whole bunch of different flavors on it? And not only do you signal to your body that
you're talking about Doritos now.
You signal to your body that there's something within this food that is not actually there, but you mess up the sense of taste to train yourself to only want flavors that are not naturally available.
Yep.
So that the flavors that are actually directing you toward what is good no longer taste as good because you are comparing them to the artificially enhanced flavors that are not actually linked with anything. And so if you think about that, that is a symbol for what we do with everything, right? So if you think about what like pornography versus like sex and marriage, right? There's one that's like artificially flavored.
It's the counterfeit.
Exactly. It's a counterfeit. It literally could describe anything that we've done in this modern age. It's like there's a good, real thing that tastes good and is joyful and is actually really, really good. And yet there's this other thing that has been artificially flavored to taste more dramatic and yet has no nutrition behind it. And it's like our entire modern lives. So coming back to your point, Dan Barber wrote a book called The Third Plate.
I like Dan Barber.
Another great book. I love that book. And at the end of it, he talks about growing a carrot that, and the carrot he grew had 10 times more sugar than the carrot he bought at Whole Foods. And he didn't, judge nutritional value, but it had more stuff in it, which not only meant that it was a more nutritious carrot, it meant it tasted better. Because when you come to real food, that which tastes better is actually better for you. And so if you think about all of these ideas of like Christianity is meant to take our fun away. Christianity is meant to like
be the buzzkill,
live a joyless life because it doesn't want me to eat the Dorito. All we're saying is don't eat the artificially flavored crap because there's nothing good for you. But if you teach yourself, if you can get rid of those flavors and start enjoying that which is actually good for you, you're going to find a better flavor, right? Yeah. You're going to find something that actually tastes better and actually is good for you. And I think that also,
and then makes your life better, makes you feel better.
Yeah.
It's long,
it's everything.
Yeah.
It's everything. And it's supposed to be pleasurable. Yeah. It's supposed to be joyful.
Is salt
it's supposed to be, sorry.
No. I interrupted you. Is salt an artificial flavor?
No.
Okay. Just,
I mean, that's real. Like biblical.
You are the salt of the earth.
I know.
Can salt lose its salty? Let me stop.
But I think we would agree we consume too much sugar. I don't want to start a whole thing, but I have 2 controversial questions.
Yeah, go for it.
The government's food pyramid, is that pretty much been debunked at this point? Okay.
Yes. I feel like agrees. Every side is
everyone agrees.
We're all an embarrassment about that.
That was a terrible idea.
I mean,
it was like a bumper crop of corn and they had to...
Or wheat, it's like, okay. So, I mean, it's like 5 or 6 like grain and wheats a day. And, it's okay. More controversial. I'm wondering if in your reading of things you have come across, so there's a theory when you look at like the LGBT issue, okay, and kind of it seems to be more of a modern phenomenon. So there's theories, like, is it a social sort of, I don't say contagion, that poisons the well, but it's sort of a fad, it's a trend among young people. But there are some people that say our endocrine systems are jacked up because of our food supply, that our bodies are, not like, and then you get into the whole, like, I don't know, tetrazine or whatever it's called, where like the frogs kind of turn gay, and that was like a conspiracy theory, but actually now there are people saying, no, yeah, there's issues with frogs' gender because tetrazine was in the water, and, it's not as crazy as it sounds.
Did you think you'd be asked about gay frogs today?
I'm not asking about gay frogs.
No. You're saying,
are we messing up?
We all agree the food supply is incredibly jacked up with chemicals that shouldn't be there.
Yeah.
So we all agree we do not eat pure food unless we make a really conscious effort to do so. And I'm saying, is it a reasonable conclusion that some of those chemicals, which, we cannot trust the FDA to protect us at all. I mean, it's another... well, now I'm speaking my own thoughts. But
right.
They can be bought off. Let's put it that way. There can be a lot of corruption there. Do you think there's any merit to that, or have you come across that in your reading about pure foods and things?
I have not come across it in my reading. I would not put it beyond the realm of possibility that what we're eating has mass changes to our bodies, but I have not. And I've not actually read any of like the things that you're talking about.
Let's take the LGBT question out of it. There's a huge drop in testosterone, in men. If you look at World War II men, and men
something
today,
about soy, right?
Yeah. No, I've read this about soy.
Yeah. So that's a question. It's like, well, are we fundamentally changing? And our reproductive rates are lower, and it seems like there are all these. I don't know. When
everyone has a gluten insensitivity, I'm thinking that in 1200.
Yeah.
Which is likely more related to the way we raise wheat right now than people's actual. I think all this stuff I do not know is the answer to any of those questions, but I think all of it is potential. And it's funny because that, again, this is a place where right and left will, like, nobody likes the FDA, right? On either side, unless you're in the middle. But on either side, you go far enough and everyone's critical of it for some reason or another.
So maybe here's a question. As believers who are intrigued by what you're talking about, what are some steps that people can take, both maybe in their own sort of Christian life, but also in their eating, to like take a step in the direction back toward what God wanted for us?
Yeah, that's funny. I started this thing called Gastro Church, which is it's church over a meal, and like the meal is a part of the evening, and this theme of the meal actually leads to the conversation. And the idea was that even if we don't talk about it, I want to showcase, to kind of embody, like, this is what eating together well looks like. Because we naturally source everything. We locally source everything. We eat seasonal. We know where our food's coming from. We prepare it. We serve it family style. It's good. It tastes good. It's joyful, but it's also not fake. And then we serve together. So you're eating with 6 other people. And we give conversation questions along the way. So you're eating thoughtfully and mindfully. And the idea is that it's just kind of in the water of how we do things to offer a different way of eating. And one of the questions, we actually did a Gastro Church on food, which is my favorite kind. And one of the questions, it's great. It's a Gastro Church on Gastro Church. And one of the questions, this table topic conversations was, if you were to, after talking about this food ethic, if you were to embody your perfect food ethic, what would that look like in your life? And I do think it's different for everybody because they're going to resonate with different parts of this. For some people, the first step is just going to be eating together. And that's huge, right? Fine. Especially if...
invite some friends to your house and have a meal. That
was huge for me. Like I got married as an adult in my, I think I was 30.
That's a good time to get married.
True. I got married.
The child bride's here.
You have something against child brides.
Got married not in my 20s though. And so I spent all of my 20s as a single young adult. And I had to be intentional about eating together. It was not just kind of built in for me.
Right.
And that was huge. And that was a part of like, I need to do this. And so I think for some people, that's where they start. I think for some people, starting to pay attention to what you buy from the grocery store, even if you're not ready to, go plant your own garden yet, it's like, know where your food comes from and try to get food that is as close to creation as possible.
Yeah.
Right. So like a bean,
perimeter of the grocery store, that kind of thing.
A bean grew in the ground, right? So even wheat, which is in the middle of the grocery store, like grew from something that is as close to creation as you can. so that there is a sense that you are in some way connected to the earth that produced this. Because whether you like it or not, you are. Like what you eat connects you to the earth that produced it. What you eat is a part of how you are in your small way taking care of the earth that produced it, for better or for worse. And so I would just say, just start taking baby steps. I will also say, if you're my personality, start reading. Reading was what really, I went through a season of just binge reading food books, and it changed my life.
What's the number one, if people want to read one book to inspire them in this category of thought?
So it depends on how nerdy they are. So
they're not nerdy.
The one that changed my life was Scripture, Culture, Agriculture by Ellen Davis, but it is an academic book. And I've had a number of people try to read it and tell me that it is terrible. So if you are truly nerdy and you want to nerd out, Scripture, Culture, and Agriculture by Ellen Davis. If you want an easier in, then one of the Joel Salatin books or The Omnivore's Dilemma is...
I remember we got that one back when I was married, like way back in the day.
The Omnivore's Dilemma and
Michael
We've all three read that book. That's funny.
And what's it? Animal Vegetable Miracle.
Yeah.
It's about the year of living locally, and it's got like little tidbits thrown in. So either one of those would be.
But like
good.
shopping at a farmer's market could be another, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Small step. Yeah.
Getting food from a co-op, something like that.
What do you think about labels like organic or cage-free or trying to think of some others, but
grass-fed.
Yeah.
I mean, it's better than nothing, but it's not really like the people who are really into like the regenerative farming. Organic doesn't encapsulate what they're trying to do.
Like I think in the Omnivore's Dilemma, I think Michael Pollan or maybe it's Joel Salatin makes the point that like, is it really organic if you're flying in white asparagus from Chile on a 747 to sell at the Whole Foods in your neighborhood? I mean, it didn't use hormones or something, but yeah.
I mean, if all you're concerned about is pesticide residue, then organic will protect you from the majority of pesticide residue.
Yeah.
But like the rest of like the wholeness of trying to be in good relationship with the created order, I don't.
Yeah, I've heard too. Like they'll say like wild caught salmon. I just heard this on the Tim Pool show the other night. I can't say if it's true, but he said what actually happens is they farm raise them and then they put them release them and then catch them. So it's technically wild caught, but it wasn't.
Such a loophole. This is like when, China is going to be selling their fabrics to Mexico. So que se hecho en Mexico. Like, but it's really still Chinese. Like, stop.
Yeah. Or like cage free.
100%.
What I've heard is, well, they open the cage or something, but it doesn't mean the chicken's running around having a good time on the farm.
They're too fat to actually like,
I will say, so a lot of the farms now actually are cage free and all the chickens will be in the middle. What they'll do is if it pasture often means they just open the door in the side once the chicks are old enough, but the chicks don't go out there. Yeah. I will say, having raised chickens are not super smart. And they also don't necessarily, like my chickens are raised in my backyard. They're out all the time. But if my chickens had been inside the half of their life and then they see like a door open, like they're not going to walk through it.
It seems like
there's a whole other metaphor for you.
Yeah. It seems like cities are relaxing laws about chickens.
Yes.
So I'm wondering, it's almost like there's something in the ether saying the food supply is in big danger.
Yeah.
Take care of yourself. Grow some, have a garden, grow some fruit trees, learn how to can and have chickens. And like, if you store up on, your wheat, your beans, your rice, like you could be fine for a good while in an emergency. So start your prepping now.
Yeah, my sister-in-law. It's funny. So the other thing to say about all of this is give yourself a lot of grace because there's always going to be someone who's like way farther.
Yep.
Way far. So I am food aware depending on who you compare me to, but my children still eat like granola bars and whatnot. Yeah. My sister-in-law, we were talking the other day and she's like, well, I've been so busy with the cow that I haven't had time to grind her wheat recently.
Oh my gosh. Like, what a problem to have.
And she's like, I had to buy bread from the grocery store and I hate it. And I was like,
funny.
We are on totally different levels.
Yeah. Well, it's hard. I mean, it's this whole system we've kind of been sucked into. But
I admire people who like grind their wheat and make sourdough. I love you. I admire you. And I have not yet attained that level of.
I tried to make sourdough, couldn't do it. So I think it's too humid or something. That's my excuse. But.
Well, I appreciate, I just to close this out, like I think you're talking about the counterfeit version of things and the real version of things that are meant to bring us joy and health and blessing and flourishing. Like that, that's a takeaway for me. I think that's beautiful. And I'm going to be thinking about that next time I'm at the grocery store or the farmer's market. And I'm not even joking. After we get off this podcast, I want to talk about splitting a cow. Maybe it's not with y'all, but I'm going to find somebody.
Yeah.
So thank you for joining us.
You should read, there's a book called The Dorito Effect.
Okay.
The Dorito Effect. It's all about flavor. And it's fascinating.
Well, anytime I buy truffle oil, I sort of have to pretend like I don't know that it's not really. It's just like truffle flavor that's made in some New Jersey
Is that because
factory.
truffles are actually like $8,000 an ounce or something?
Something like that.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Gotcha.
But I do still use truffle oil.
Well, our next step, once we have chickens and we master that, we'll get pigs to go find truffles. So our own truffles.
That's the same kind of pig as I want.
Yeah. Okay. We do. I know y'all have places to be today, so we're going to close it out. But Meredith, people can find you at Westminster
WUMC.com. and gastrochurch.org. So
cool.
And she will be on our panel for our December event. If you're listening to this, December 12th, we're going to be talking about women in ministry.
Yes.
Dun, dun, dun. I don't know if that's scandalous to most people or not, but to some it is. And so Meredith will be on the panel. You can check her out there too.
It's almost as scandalous as the the food supply. So, but Sarah, people can find you
everywhere. Social media, HoustonTOT.com. All of us have, I don't know if people know this, but there's a leadership page on our website and it has little blurbs about all of us and a little bit about our background and our beliefs. And you should go check it out. HoustonTOT.com, probably /leadership. I don't know. Hunt for it.
Yeah. It should have our Oprah growth rating, right? So like she's like a pro, you're a pro. I'm like way down the list.
I didn't grow it. I just canned it.
Anyway.
Jordan grew it.
Well, I'm Evan. I'm at First Lutheran. Love to see you guys at the next TOT event or something like that. Anyway, until next time, we encourage you to question freely, think deeply, and disagree as needed.